Peter Craig Dutton, welcome to No Filter.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
I am so intrigued by you because you are a contender for the highest job in the land. Aside from Governor-General, is that the highest?
Aside from Governor-General, yeah, that's
aside
true.
from Governor-General. And yet you travel amongst us as almost like a mythical beast because you are a man with no nickname.
Oh no, I get lots of darts, Dutto.
Oh, darts.
Yeah,
and Dutto.
that's sort of the main thing. I PC from my schoolmates from high school. That's
What
probably
do you get,
that's
P-
probably
PC?
Peter Craig.
Oh, right, okay.
So
because then you were a
NPD,
police constable. You were
PC, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, right. Because you're very intriguing in the sense that if you look at the political landscape, which most of us don't get to do with kind of any, microscopic detail. I know the shape of Albanese, who's the Prime Minister, but I do not know the shape of you. And when I speak to other friends, it's a very common kind of relationship that people have with you. Why do you think that is?
I think it's true of most contenders for this office because the public just don't have a day-to-day interest in politics. It's part of our culture. And when people see it on TV, they flick the channel or they're annoyed by the discussion or one's as bad as the other or it's a boring conversation, not relevant to me. And it's not until people start to sharpen their focus and think about, in some cases, not until the dying hours of a campaign about who they're going to vote for. So if you're a reality TV star, as is the case in the US, then I guess you're a household name. But
right.
Here, that's I don't think that's generally the case.
I ask because, there's the perception of you as being like a formidable, kind of like a darkish sort of figure.
Yes, yeah.
And this amazing thing happened to me last week when I was at the Kylie concert, right, in Melbourne. And this guy came up to me and he said, I won't say his name, but you'll be able to work out who it is. Or anyway, and he ended up saying to me he was there with his partner and he said, I'm a politician. And I said, oh, that's interesting. My brother's a politician. He goes, I know your brother. My brother's in the Liberal Party in Queensland. And I told him that I was interviewing you. And he said, well, I don't sit on that side of the aisle, but you're going to love Peter Dutton. And I was like,
that's a relief. I thought that was going very bad there for a second.
How bizarre, because I'm like, mate, you are high on Kylie. Right? Like, what's going to happen? And then his partner said to me, she said, I'm so left, I'm nearly not even on the same page. But if I was lost, Peter Dutton is the man that I would want looking for me.
Well, that's very kind.
Now, that was extraordinary to me, only because it was so at odds with what I'm going to say the public perception of
Yeah,
you
no, I
is.
think it's a fair point. And I think you get painted in a particular way and sometimes you can be your own worst enemy. And I've had roles which are pretty tough roles and that shapes how people perceive you. And in a 6-second grab on the TV of a nighttime where you're trying to deliver a blow to your political opponent, that's different than if you're doing a long-form interview or you're doing a breakfast TV segment and you're able to joke and show the true side. And I've also been a very private person. It sort of sounds strange, but I don't enjoy talking about my childhood and my family and the rest of it. It's a given, it's a must. Because of this job, you're in the public eye, so you have no choice. But maybe because of that, I haven't sort of opened up enough over the years about my background, who I am, what has influenced me, and more of that story has come out over the last couple of years. And it has, I mean, it's amazing how many people have that exact conversation. They stop you at an airport or at a shopping centre and say, I saw you on this or heard you on that, and just completely different than I thought you were. And it's funny how people can tell it. So I remember in 2018 when we had a leadership change and Malcolm left the Prime Ministership, I remember thinking at that stage, if I leave politics now, I'm sort of disappointed because people won't ever truly know who I am. And that's sort of a bit of a self-indulgent thing.
You had the sense of that then?
Yes, yeah. And I thought, people are going to I'll be recorded in history, sort of this dark figure, as you say, and that's actually not who I am. And fortunately, since that time, people have been able to see, more of me, more of my views, my background, and all of that. So, yeah, it's been an interesting transition.
Well, the background that you don't like talking about, eldest of 5 kids?
Eldest of 5, least favourite. It's always the youngest, right?
The eldest, this is what, I have 4 children and in our family the kids all believe the youngest is my favourite. But the eldest often has responsibility heaped upon them. What was your family
Kiralee has
like?
this great theory about
Your wife?
order, and my wife, about birth order and where you are sort of, determines who you are, etc. So, but anyway, that aside.
Hang on, what does she say?
She said, well, in
part
part that the firstborn believe that they can rule the world or something like that. And
really?
There's I should listen more intently actually to what she's telling me, but it basically talks about the role of the youngest, and that was, I suppose, in terms of my experience, it was 10 years between me and my youngest sister. So, and I grew up in a family of 5, and with Dad working, with Mum.
What did your dad? Was your dad a builder?
Dad started as a bricklayer and then was a builder.
Right. Okay.
And worked really hard, set a good example. And Mum was originally a secretary and then took in kids. So did family daycare, morning and afternoon, before and after school, before that was a thing. And then she went into childcare, and so that meant at home we were all expected to either clean up the dishes, clear the plates, or
so it was a disciplined
do the wash, do the folding, or whatever it was. Or in my case, and I fondly remember it. I probably griped about it at the time, but you're changing nappies and feeding, the baby who's 10 years younger than you, etc., and lugging her around on your hip. So yeah, there's that was my experience, and I've got amazing siblings, so very proud of them.
And then you became a copper.
Yes.
And you became a copper when you were quite young.
When I was about 19, yeah.
And how did that idea occur to you?
Well, there's a great photo, I think, when I was at kindy and fully dressed in the police uniform, with a gun on the side, and so I think I'd always had an interest or a fascination at a young age, but Mum convinced me rightly that I should go to uni. No one had been to uni in the family, and I did that for about for 2 years. And then I deferred, and I came back and finished it part-time as a Bachelor of Business degree. But I'd always wanted to go into the police. I never sort of thought of myself as, sitting in an office 9 to 5. And I liked the idea of policing, in that it was fast-moving. You didn't know what the next radio call would be. Didn't know what was on the other side of that door. And so I felt that was for me.
That's extraordinary. I read this thing once that if you look at the sort of socioeconomic background of cops, it often resembles criminals. So it's really that they come from very similar backgrounds, obviously, but they've just chosen diametrically opposed paths. When you're a cop, what did you learn from it that you've brought with you now?
I led a very happy childhood growing up. So I'd never experienced, drug use, or I'd never seen domestic violence. That wasn't, our environment. So I grew up, I think, naively, and my eyes were like saucers. And first shift and seeing, some of the horrific things that you see, delivering death messages, the domestic violence, the motor vehicle accidents, the kids, all of that, I think you just grow up overnight. And as a 19, 20-year-old being exposed to all of that. And I'd also, I'd wanted to stay in Brisbane because I had a girlfriend in Brisbane. But when I graduated from the academy, I got posted to Townsville, which was sort of traumatic at the time.
Right.
But fantastic because it made me grow up being away from home. And it's confronting. So I think you carry that experience, those images with you, and it's part of the reason that I really concentrated, particularly in the immigration and home affairs portfolios, on protecting women and children, and that was important to me. When I first came into Parliament, was really passionate about a case where a young baby had been abducted in Queensland, and it's sort of quite a famous case, the Deirdre Kennedy abduction, and I'd worked with Faye, her mother, and there was a great injustice in that family, and I'd worked on that job just very briefly as a surveillance officer, and I was very passionate about that and changing that law, and we ended up getting the law modernised in relation to DNA technology. And I think it's probably in part what caught John Howard's eye early on, because I was fortunate enough to be promoted into the ministry after just one term. And
still quite young.
And still, I was 33, I guess, something like that. And so, I mean, I've always felt passionately about that. I believe with kids and young girls in particular that robbing that innocence of their childhood and not allowing them to enjoy their childhood, their development. I always found that very horrific, really. And similarly for women going into, and I remember going into countless domestic violence scenes and, blood everywhere, kids clinging onto mum's legs or even dad's legs. All of that is, I mean, you can't help but be affected by that. And that's not something that I grew up with. And I just thought for a woman in particular, not feeling safe in that home environment that had been, the refuge for me and my safe space growing up, if you don't feel safe there, where could you feel safe? And so, I mean, that's been a lifetime passion of mine, and it's one of the areas, if I am fortunate enough to become Prime Minister, that I really want to concentrate on. I just don't think we do well enough in our country.
So a lot of these issues that lead to domestic violence, for instance, become systemic. So, poverty or a whole lot of, drug abuse, etc. There's a reliance on the government to correct faults that lie at a familial level or at a relationship level. And yet the Liberal Party is not generally the party that people think of that are compassionate in that area.
No, it's funny. I think that's probably a fair conclusion. But when you look at what we did when we were in government, the programs that we funded, particularly over COVID, where we were really concerned about people being, stuck at home together in relationships that probably work because both parties are working for, long hours and not spending every waking hour together. And so we put a lot into that, into programs and into NGOs, and provided support around housing, around support for women in those situations. So I made a particular focus on cancelling visas when I had that responsibility of people who had perpetrated domestic violence, pedophiles, people who had sexually assaulted women and children, drug dealers and others. And I remember each of those cases, as you're looking at it, there are 6 or 8 victims before you're dealing with the case. And you think, if this decision had been made earlier, those Australian citizens wouldn't have fallen prey to that pedophile or that individual. And there's a sense of satisfaction in doing that, even though it's a tough decision to make to deport someone from the country, but particularly when they've got their own family. But you also do it with the knowledge that they're not going on to offend against the next girl and against the next woman and et cetera, et cetera. So when you look at that, and I think it's hard then to reconcile that we're not compassionate or that we don't have a focus as members of the Liberal Party on protecting women or putting in place, better arrangements. Because
you have a very beautiful family, you have a modern family in the sense that it's well documented that your daughter has
Rebecca, yes.
Yeah, that Rebecca has a different mum,
yes.
but Kiraleigh's been a mum to her. You've got 2 sons also. You've done extremely well in business. Your wife has also done well in business. When you come from a position of being extremely comfortable, how do you still read the rest of the country? Because politicians love to say, Australians are doing it tough, without an acknowledgement that the reason that we may be doing it tough is because of things that you have done.
Yeah. That's a fair point. Look, people can judge, Anthony Albanese, or they can judge me. I can only talk from my perspective. I believe that I'm the same person I was when I came into politics. I mean, hopefully I've matured in a number of ways and different, perspectives, etc. But I've got the same friends from school. I've always been conscious of keeping your feet on the ground, and I've never forgotten growing up in a bigger family or in an environment where there were arguments about money, and there wasn't enough money to pay the bills. And Dad was a builder, as I say, worked his guts out, but he could price 10 jobs and get none. And when the economy turned, he could price 10 and get 10. And I mean, I went to work part-time after school every day because I had always from a young age wanted to, be financially successful. And so I've never forgotten those roots, and I never will. And I think that's demonstrated in a number of the decisions that I've made in different portfolios. And I would want to bring that to the Office of Prime Minister as well.
Okay, my slight issue with that is that the times are so different now, and the times are different now because of policies that governments have implemented over the years. For instance, you could buy a house when you were 19.
Correct.
Whereas many Australians now
impossible.
will
Near
never
impossible.
be able to buy a house.
Yeah.
So the times are different. You can't work your way, and I have much respect for your work ethic, by the way, and I don't think work probably gets the respect that it deserves and the role that it plays in people's lives. My question is really, on a policy level, it seems to me, and you alluded to this earlier, that people don't see a difference between the parties, and in fact uni-party seems to be a prevalent sort of thing. Government loves big Australia, but most Australians don't love big Australia. But governments love big Australia because it means, more taxes and more growth, and banks love big Australia, and building companies love big Australia. How do you reconcile that inclination towards satisfying the business end of town versus what Australians want?
Well, it's a huge issue because a couple of points. One, I don't think we plan well enough in this country for migration movements, and we've got a natural instinct to want to live closer to the coast, and the government's bringing in their migration program about a population the same size as Adelaide over the course of a 5-year period, which is a lot of people. When you stop and think about that, we're not building the extra hospitals and the extra capacity at schools and in GP clinics, etc. So I think we do plan really poorly in this country, and it's part of the reason why this perfect storm has percolated, because we've got Australians who are lining up to rent a property paying 20% more for rent. They can't get a roof over their own head. Young people are lining up at auctions and expected to pay $500,000 over the reserve price to get a basic house. And so, I get that. And the reason that I'm passionate about making sure that we allow people to realise that dream of home ownership again is that I just think with a house you've got, or a unit, but with a combination you've got stability. I think it's good for a relationship. I think it's good stability when kids come along. I think if you can get to the point where you've paid the house off by retirement, you can enjoy the hard work that you've spoken about, enjoy your life because of the hard work you've spoken about. I think you've then got an asset that's grown in value to give to your kids or your grandkids and set them up, right? So housing. That's why it's such a big part of our culture.
That you think you need to tell me how great it is to own a house.
But I think it's important, because I think a lot of people, when you look at, and it's sort of a long way of answering your question about there's different views. We've got an amazing migrant population in our country. When you speak to many people from different migrant communities, they say, please, could we bring our parents or our the remaining 3 sisters or brothers from our family? And so they want a bigger migration program. And business, as you say, wants to bring more people in because they think they can't get the workforce without that migrant workforce. So we've got to make sure there's supply of housing. we've got to take care of Australians first, including people who have just become Australian citizens, and make sure they don't lose the dream of home ownership. And we've got an ageing population like what most Western democracies or communities and economies. And so we've got to get that balance right. And we haven't got it right. The supply side of housing has sort of dried up, and you've got this big demand with the migration program. And we've said that we should chill out a bit on that for a couple of years until we can recalibrate the two, because otherwise that dream of home ownership is just going to get further and further away. But you look at every time you jump into an Uber or go to a service station or a 7-Eleven or tradies now, there's a big migrant element to all of that. And they're not people who have come from riches. These are people who see the golden ticket of Australian citizenship as an opportunity to create wealth and stability for their kids and grandkids in a way that their grandparents who were living in a village somewhere could never have contemplated. And I think that's part of the great Australian tapestry and dream. And I don't think we should ever lose sight of that. See, one of the things I don't think we do in our country well enough is talk about the great migrant story, particularly since the Second World War. People who came here with literally nothing out of war-torn Europe.
Well, my parents were migrants.
Yeah, well, you know, and came here as tilers, as bricklayers, as teachers, as, you know, agricultural workers, whatever. And now their grandkids are doctors and millionaires and, you know, radio superstars, you know, whatever. I mean, we should be holding those examples up as examples of aspiration. We've got to be proud again of who we are as a people in a country. And people look at Australia and think, you are the best country in the world. And sometimes I think we lose sight of that. And we should be embracing it and running with it and helping as many people along the way as we can.
What do you love about Australia?
I love the fact that we've got choice, we've got freedom of our expression of thought, and that if you start with nothing, you can get ahead and you can create an opportunity. And that might seem hard for some people at different points in their life, but we have an incredible society where we take care of people who are in need, can't take care of themselves, but we also have a system where people can work hard, sacrifice, and realise their dreams. And I think we should protect and defend that at every opportunity. Your
family, obviously very supportive of your dreams and your career. But yet, and I know I alluded to the fact that my brother's a politician, when someone in the family decides to become a politician, everyone else is
swept. You get branded, exactly. Yeah,
everyone else is swept up with that, whether they want to or not. It's a form of selfishness that we have to hope in our politicians is underwritten by a desire for the greater good.
I think that's right. I think it's also true that, I mean, you know, in your family you've got two famous people with pretty identifiable surnames. So any of your cousins or kids or whatever, you know, would automatically get the question, are you related to? You know, do you know? And so I talk to my cousins about it, and most of they say, mate, we're really proud of what you do, and we're very, very happy to be asked the question and to answer it. And maybe that's just a brave sort of face that they're putting on it for me. But I'm really conscious of it because, particularly with your own kids, they're not. I think it was once famously said that they're conscripts, right? They're not.
Yes.
They haven't sought a public life, and I suppose for any kids, the family, you know, you're born into comes with upside and downside, and they're balanced and they're good about it. But yeah, that is a definite downside.
What percentage of your family, extended, because I gather you're quite close to your extended family,
yes,
shares your politics?
I think it'd be a majority.
Yeah, right.
Maybe
just, are you sometimes there at a family barbecue going, I'm not sure about Sean.
Wait for what he's going to say. No, generally not. And generally, like in most conversations with your friends as well, I've got a lot of mates who wouldn't vote, hopefully they will at this election, but wouldn't vote Liberal normally. And, we get on like a house on fire. And generally it's a discussion about cricket or golf or family or, Olympics or whatever's in the news. And there's not a heavy conversation around politics, which actually is refreshing because you need to be able to switch off and just, be yourself.
I think also there's an appetite for things not to be so binary.
Yes.
When people have divergent politics, and I always think someone said this, the bird needs the right wing and the left wing to fly.
Yes.
But that doesn't seem to be the case in the current climate.
Well, I mean, if you go back to, ancient times, I mean, the politicians were...
I do go back to ancient times.
Well, I go back before you. But it's always been an adversarial... It's like a courtroom environment where you've got each side of the argument, the prosecution and the defence arguing vehemently for their belief. I just think as long as it's done in a respectful way, you can have strong views. And as the Prime Minister's pointed out, and as I've said publicly, I mean, he and I get on well personally. We can have a conversation if there's an issue around a national security issue that we need to deal with. We do, and we do it respectfully. Neither of us leak the conversation. So, I think we act in an honourable way. But we've just got a different pathway of getting to probably the same objective of what's best for our country.
I think, touching on what you just said, a lot of people suspect that the seemingly two opposing sides of politics are more aligned with each other than you are with the interests of us.
I think we're more aligned with each other than people realise, but generally that's because there's an obvious answer and you support it. It's a chicken and egg scenario as well, because the media aren't reporting the boring sort of consensus. We found common ground today in Parliament and people were really pleased with the outcome. That rarely makes it onto the news. It's the colour and movement, and that's what tunes people in. That's what informs the clickbait. That's what people want to read the titillating bits and pieces about your property ownership or what you did or what you said.
Your bank shares.
Yeah, exactly, all of that. But the mundane stuff where there is agreement, which is probably 80% of the time, and in the public's best interests. So I do think our stars align with where the public is. That just sort of goes through to the keeper.
People want to draw parallels between Australia and what's happened in America. So you're painted as some kind of down under Trump.
Well, I'm accused of being not Trump enough to Trump, not Trump-like, Trump-like. I mean, it's just your detractors will say, you look like Trump or you're acting like Trump, because they think that is a way of landing a blow on you. I mean, that's what they're trying to do. I'm a very different person to President Trump. And my biggest influences in political life have been John Howard and Peter Costello. And I worked as assistant treasurer to Peter Costello. I still, have a conversation with and see John Howard as a mentor. And, not that I agree with everything that he said or did or his different approaches, but there was a stability and there was a certainty in and a strength in his leadership and character. And I admired that always and still do. So there will be things that we can agree with the US on and things that we'll have disagreements. I don't agree with President Trump at all in relation to Ukraine and what's happening there at the moment. I think the incursion, the invasion, the killing of people by Putin is an abomination. And so I don't like the characterisation of that. That's how I see it. And I will always act in our country's best interests. And I think in a dynamic relationship like that, particularly with President Trump, you've got to have a Prime Minister here in Australia who's prepared to stand up for our national interests, what we believe in, and that's that I think is an essential.
I mentioned this conversation has the potential to reach a vast swathe of Australian women, and I want to give you a chance to speak directly to them.
Well, I want to be a Prime Minister who can govern for our country and for all Australians, but I strongly believe in making sure that people have dignity in their lives, women in particular, and that means first and foremost running an economy where if you're sitting at home pulling your hair out in a garage or the back bedroom with your online business, I want to be a Prime Minister that creates an environment where you can make sales and that financial independence and success gives you options and opportunities. And I want to be a Prime Minister that can provide an environment where you can afford to put a roof over your head and to recover from a marriage breakdown or a violent relationship. And I want an opportunity where people can, at different points in their life, feel comfortable about making choices that are right for them and facilitating those choices. And that, I think, is important. When I go up to Alice Springs and speak to women in town camps or Indigenous elders up there, their view is no different to women in the cities or frankly, a lot of parents, male or female. Their instinct is to, when you speak to them, what can I do for you? What are the priorities? I want a roof over my head. I want a safe environment. I want to be able to educate my kids. I want to be able to pay the bills. I want a good health system, and I want an environment where my kids, when they graduate from school or from a trade or from university, can find a job. And they're pretty basic human instincts. And
women also want physical autonomy.
Yes, yeah, and again, I mean, it's people will want to concentrate in the health space, but I'm proud of the fact that I set up the Medical Research Future Fund, which has now got $22 billion in it. It provides a lot of research into breast cancer, into ovarian cancer, into brain cancers, cancers for children.
What was your motivation for that, by the way? What was the impetus for that?
Well, again, it's I think there's a human dignity element to being able to live in a country like ours and receive the medical attention. We've got some of the best researchers in the world, and I didn't think they had the stability in the money for their research that was required.
And we've had a big brain drain as a result.
Yes, and look, Australia's a market of 27 million people, so many of those researchers will automatically, at some stage in their career, be attracted to London or to parts of Asia or Europe or the United States, wherever. And look, in many cases, that's a great thing because they expand their knowledge and they come back here when they want to raise their kids or when they want to retire, and they contribute to the health space here or the medical research space. So, yeah, I think that's part of that thinking. And many other things that you can do if you manage the economy well and you've got good economic settings, you've got good revenues coming in, you can start to pay for different programs. And particularly mental health, I think, is a huge issue where we just haven't got it right in this country yet. And the number of young women presenting with mental health issues and online safety.
Have you ever had issues like post-policing or whatever?
I think not diagnosed, but I think if knowing what I know now about the impact that it has, even in the way in which you raise your own children, the way that we've been protective of them in a public place, particularly of Rebecca, but the boys as well. Yes, I think how can that not have an influence on you? And it's how you manage with that and the support you provide. And for me, meditation's a big part of my life as well, which I find.
Yeah, that was surprising to me.
I don't know why, but I find it a good reset and I find it a good clearing of your mind. And particularly, if you're starting at 4:35 in the morning and you're not finishing until 10 or 11 at night, you're going all day, and you do need to take 10 or 20 minutes to reset, I think, and focus on yourself. And I think unless you're physically and mentally well, it's hard to do jobs like the one I'm in or like the one I'm aspiring to be in.
What do you do physically, by the way?
I always stay at a hotel with a good gym. So I try to go to the gym early or go for a walk or a run.
Very disciplined.
But honestly, I don't know why, but I'm sure the scientists can explain it better than I can. But I have a really flat start to the day if I don't do exercise, but I feel invigorated if I do. And it means you're tired at the end of the day because you've got up earlier to do it. And sometimes I think, I'll just hit the snooze button, sleep in. I'll do it in the afternoon, which of course never happens.
Nothing physical happens in the afternoon, not even afternoon delight.
No, that's exactly right. So look, it's for me that's an important part of the routine. And it also, I just think out walking, you can listen to a bit of music or nothing at all.
Do you walk with Kiralee when you get the chance?
Yes, we do actually. Yeah, which is. It's not a substitute for date night, but it is a good time to spend some time together and just have a chat in a relaxed environment.
What is the secret of having a happy marriage for as long as you two have?
I don't know, because I had plenty of unhappy relationships before that.
Sure,
where it just didn't work, right? Despite your best efforts. So I think it depends on where you are in life. I think your own maturity obviously feeds into it. And, I got married way too young and
The first time?
Yeah, and to an amazing person, but we were just too young and headed in different directions, etc. And so I think it's about your perspective on life, and I think not trying to change the other party is important. You can try and sort of smooth a few rough edges.
What if they're wrong?
Well, then that's their prerogative, and they can be wrong. And I think you've got to accept people for the good and the bad, and you don't. If you're chasing perfection every time and you want your own way every time, it just doesn't work. And you also need, from my experience, and each their own, and everyone's got their own formula. But for us, it's not letting things. I never want my head to hit the pillow if we've had a disagreement about something, and I just think you should finish each day in a good space, even if you've got to suck it up a bit and swallow a bit of pride. And you might still have the discussion the next day, but I think go to bed at night knowing that the relationship means enough to you to try and resolve those problems. I also think you've got to spend a lot of time on that together time. Like it's sort of a geeky thing to sort of say, or maybe a sloppy thing to say. But I just think if you're not able to speak with each other freely and have that discussion, then you've got to work out how you can do that. And it's I don't know. Like I've married somebody who is we're sort of yin and yang in terms of organised. So Kiralee, always when the kids were young, things were packed, lunches were made. She was ready to get out of the door while I was still getting out of the shower. And she's always been well organised like that. And I think that where you can find that yin and yang in different parts of your relationship, you complement each other ultimately. So, but you can still have big points of difference.
Okay, I would like to ask you one thing. Should you win the election, do you think you're going to?
I think we can win the election. It hasn't happened since 1931 for a first-term government to lose. So it's a huge task, and we've got to win about 20 seats, which is a big undertaking. But there's no doubt in my mind that we can win if we work hard, we're disciplined, and we put the policies out that can capture people's imaginations.
Well, if you do win, I would like to invite you to come back.
Thank you. Exactly
a year from today.
Deal.
And I would like to know, given the ethos, the mission statement of Mamamia, which is to improve the world for women and girls.
Yes.
I would like to discuss with you in that intervening period what you have done to that end.
Firstly, an absolute commitment, and it should be a conversation that continues on for the year about what we can do to make lives for women and young girls better, and particularly, as I said, a real focus with online and safety online, and being able to deal with the transmission of images, and women and girls can feel safe living a bigger part of their lives online than they ever have. And but there are many other issues, housing, etc., that I spoke about before, Kate. So I think there's a lot of work for us to do, and it'd be great to work with you and great to be back here in 12 months' time.
I'll shake on that.
Okay, deal.
And then I want to ask you one more thing.
Yeah.
Do you know the saying, hard men make good times make weak men make hard times?
I have heard that, yes.
Are you a strong man?
I'll let you be the judge of that. I believe that I have a strength of character and an ability to make tough decisions, to exercise compassion when it's needed and regularly, but to make the tough decisions for our country, to keep people safe, to create a strong economy. I do believe that I've got that strength, and I believe I can demonstrate that as Prime Minister.
Peter Dutton, thank you for sharing yourself with No Filter.
Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you.